On Thursday, CIA Director William Burns called China Russia's silent partner as he made references to Putin's attack on Ukraine during a speech at Georgia Tech.
A silent partner in Putin's aggression, Xi Jinping's China is our greatest challenge, in many ways the most profound test that CIA has ever faced.
He said, "We have never had an adversary with more reach in domains ranging from military, economic, space, and cyberspace than we currently have with a very ambitious China."
The People's Republic of China is intent upon building the capabilities to bully its neighbors, replace the United States as the preeminent power in the Indo-Pacific, and chip away with other authoritarians at the rules-based international order that we and our allies have worked so hard to sustain.
He said that the problem with China's rise is that the communist nation has used its capabilities against the U.S. and its own people.
In the last few years, Beijing has hacked at least 150 U.S. companies to steal secrets. It is trying to increase its nuclear arsenal to 1,000 warheads. It has detained 1 million of its own citizens simply because they are Muslim, and arrested thousands more in Hong Kong for peacefully supporting democracy.
Director Burns said his concerns were about the communist regime, not the Chinese people.
It's important to be clear that our concern is about the threat posed by the People's Republic of China, the PRC, not about the people of China, let alone fellow Americans of Chinese or Asian descent.
Burns said that the CIA is establishing a new mission center to focus on China and will double the number of Chinese speakers and officers abroad in a similar fashion to what was done with Soviet specialists during the Cold War. When we think of America's natural resources, we often think of oil and gas, but not necessarily the critical rare earth minerals that are used in a wide variety of applications, many of which are vital to our way of life, being used in products from semiconductors to electric vehicles. China has been focused on creating a monopoly on such minerals both in the U.S. and inside of mineral-rich Africa. And as a result, the U.S. is now heavily dependent on foreign countries for many of these natural resources. We sat down with Eric Fitzsimmons, former Deputy Assistant Secretary in the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy during the Trump administration. Here's a look. Alex Fitzsimmons, thank you so much for joining us on the Capitol Report.
Hi, Steve. Thank you for having me.
Alex, I just want to ask you, during the Trump administration, what do you think were some of the key policies that were able to keep the cost of energy, specifically gasoline, down?
Yeah. It's a great question, Steve. The Trump administration focused on a pro-growth, all-of-the-above strategy to make sure that we're maximizing the resources that we have here in the United States. I mean, the United States is now the #1 producer of oil and natural gas in the world, something that nobody thought was possible 10 years ago, and we're exporting our liquefied natural gas to more than 37 countries around the world. That didn't just happen by accident. It happened because we invested in more innovation. We invested in streamlined permitting processes to encourage producers in the United States to drill more at home so we don't have to rely on foreign adversaries.
Now, Alex, the Democrats say that now is the time to make a hard transition to renewable energy. Is it as simple as that, or is it a situation where it's trying to fit a square peg into a round hole?
Well, I think it's important to recognize that most of us have the same shared goals in terms of we want an affordable, reliable, and clean energy system, right? And we want to produce that energy here at home in the United States, which means that we need to be focused on a broad portfolio of clean energy technologies, everything from fossil fuel power plants with carbon capture, natural gas, advanced nuclear power, clean hydrogen, and of course, wind and solar and energy storage as well. But that's why if we're going to have the most affordable, reliable, clean, and secure energy system as possible, we need to be investing in a broad portfolio of technologies. And the United States has demonstrated that we can do that. We don't have to choose between protecting the environment and having a clean energy system that's low cost and that works for everyone. We've shown that we can do both. The U.S. is the #1 reducer of CO2 emissions in the world. And of course, there's a lot more we can do, and the only way we can do more is by investing in a broad range of clean energy technologies.
So when we talk about natural resources, I think natural gas, oil tends to, take up a lion's share of the conversation. But there's also rare earth minerals. The United States has a lot of these minerals. How important is it to our national security, do you think, to be extracting these?
It's important to recognize that critical minerals are vital to modern society. I mean, they are in our smartphones, our laptops, our clean energy technologies, and they're also used for a variety of national security purposes. But unfortunately, our critical mineral supply chains are largely controlled by foreign adversaries, including the Chinese and Russian governments. The U.S. is import reliant on 30 of 35 critical minerals, and we have zero production capacity for 14 of those minerals. We have to do something about this if we are going to have a secure and reliable energy system that also promotes our national security, because energy security is national security. And so we need to be investing in all parts of the supply chain, both the upstream processing and the midstream separations and processing capabilities, which is something that we focused on a lot when I was working on critical minerals in the Trump administration.
You mentioned our adversaries having a hold on these minerals, China and Russia. Specifically, you hear about China in their operations in Africa, also here in the United States. How concerning is this?
It's a serious concern, and we see the results of this playing out on the world stage today. I mean, most of the world's cobalt, for example, which is a critical mineral, comes from the Congo. And China has been buying up mines in the Congo for years. And even if China does not control the mining process, they control the midstream separations and processing capability for cobalt and for most critical minerals, which means that even if we were to invest in mining abroad, and I think we should, if we don't also develop and invest in a domestic processing capability, then we're just moving the supply chain vulnerability somewhere else. It's why it's important to have a total supply chain strategy if we are truly going to have a domestic and secure supply chain for critical minerals in the U.S.
Alex Fitzsimmons, thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Chris Magnus, head of the U.S. Customs and Border Protection, said that Texas Governor Abbott is not properly coordinating with the federal government when he buses illegal immigrants to Washington, D.C. A third bus of illegal aliens arrived from Texas to Washington, D.C. on Friday. Commissioner Magnus's statement said there was shared interest in an orderly and humane immigration process. On Wednesday, immigrants told NTD staff that a charitable organization was providing food and bus tickets to their final destinations. Governor Abbott is shipping illegal immigrants to the Capitol as a way to protest President Biden's plan to terminate Title 42, a public health policy that made it easier to expel illegal immigrants at the border. The Republican National Committee voted unanimously to withdraw from the Commission on Presidential Debates. The commission governs the general election debates. The vote comes after the GOP urged candidates not to participate in televised debates unless the commission adopts major reforms. RNC chairwoman Ronna McDaniel says the commission is refusing to enact simple and common sense reforms. She is asking for changes, including hosting debates before voting begins and selecting moderators who have never worked for the candidates in the debate. McDaniel says the GOP is going to find other better debate platforms than the commission, and she's calling the commission biased and prone to partisanship. A longtime donor to prominent Democrats has been sentenced to 30 years in prison. 67-year-old Edward Buck was found guilty of 9 felony counts involving the overdose deaths of 2 men. Buck was a longtime donor to the top Democratic candidates, including Hillary Clinton during her 2016 presidential campaign. The judge ruling on the case was appointed by Clinton's husband, former President Bill Clinton. Court papers said that for years through 2019, Buck engaged in what authorities called a pattern of party and play. The businessman would solicit men, including the homeless and those struggling with drug addiction, to consume drugs he provided. In some cases, Buck injected the victims with the drugs. Buck's lawyers argued that Buck himself had been a victim of sexual abuse and that he should be given the opportunity to rehabilitate and obtain treatment for the underlying issues. The doors at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue are reopening to the public, and ticket holders will be able to tour the White House. Public tours were put on hold in early 2020 due to the CCP virus. According to the White House statement, the situation will be monitored closely based on recommendations from the CDC and other health officials. Anyone who tests positive for the CCP virus or has related symptoms within the last 10 days is being advised to stay home. And the White House will host the annual Easter egg roll on Easter Monday. President Biden and the First Lady are expected to welcome some 30,000 people from across the country. This includes thousands of military families.